Oh, we're live, all right.
Rotten Deadite, the stream is starting.
There we go.
Groovy twinkling lights.
Finally. Okay.
That's a pretty...
No, we're live like right now. Ladies and gentlemen, variations thereof, welcome to the Selectives Lorecast, a casual Elder Scrolls podcast. I am your host, Rotten Deadite. With me today are...
Andrew. I am also known as the Light Guar and Silverdra Infidel in Twitch.
James, also known as Aramithius, pretty much everywhere that I talk about Elder Scrolls.
Hi, I'm Michael. You may know me as Scourgicus or Moon Sugar Leader.
Luther, are you still live?
Sir. What? Didn't I speak?
No.
We didn't catch you.
Luther's having communication issues.
Can you hear me? Oh,
Yep.
no.
Yeah. So today we're talking about I don't know. So today we're talking about the final part of the Enantiomorphic Trinity, the Mage or the Observer. I don't really have a place to start because of how weirdly complicated this is, but I'll just summarize really quickly. For those of you who are for some reason or other watching this out of order, or haven't watched the other two episodes, you should probably go and do that. But just in case, in the Enantiomorphic relationship, in the Enantiomorphic plot, you have three characters, or roles really, not even characters, because that makes them sound like they have to be individual people. The king, who protects a thing of some kind, a MacGuffin. The thief, who wants the thing and acts to get it. And then the observer, who watches this interaction occur, and then usually you have a betrayal of some kind, and that's really the most hardcore. Like, you must have this in order to fulfill an Enantiomorphic relationship. But that's also where things start getting really creative, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So, where do you guys want to start?
I kind of do. We want to dive in with it, just with some. Well, what we have done before is examples and what we think are observers and that sort of thing within the games, so we have some common talking points to go over.
Sure, great.
How about we start with the original Enantiomorph of convention?
Okay.
I think that's a pretty good place to start, I think.
Well, the original Enantiomorph, I think we can safely call that the Anu Padme Enantiomorph.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the observer in that relationship is a little complex because it's actually Anu. Anu is both the king and the observer. And that goes to my point that you don't necessarily have to have three people involved with the Enantiomorphic relationship. In fact, you really only need two chiral elements. That's it. Mm-hmm. In the Enantiomorph of Anu and Padme, as the story goes, Anu and Padme are chiral opposites. Their interaction or something creates the entity known as Nier. Anu and Nier have a relationship of some kind, and Padme, seeing this relationship, is jealous, kills Nier. Anu witnesses this assault, which is the requisite betrayal, and then banishes or kills Padme, throws him into the sun, and throws him away, something like that. And then Anu creates the universe as we know it. It might make Nier the observer, except that it's generally, if I understand correctly, the way that that most people consider the observer is as the entity that then becomes the that gains in power in some way or gains in enlightenment or knowledge. And in the Enantiomorphic relationship that Anu and Padme have, we generally consider Anu to be the witness because Anu becomes the Amaranth in this case. I seem to recall that we got that assumption from somewhere fairly reliable, and I don't remember if that was Kirkbride or somebody else who confirmed for us that the observer that either in the hidden Amaranth hunt that the observer was the that the witness was the Amaranth. I think that's what he said.
What?
Yeah, That was in the
No.
Amaranth hunt, but that trying to dig through that those threads to find precisely
yeah.
where that was. Yep.
There were
no.
dozens
No.
there were
That's not
dozens of
right.
threads for the hunt, so
Yeah.
That's not right at all. No.
Yeah. I'll dig that. I'll dig up the links after this, and we can. Oh, we've lost Luther. But
Yep.
I'll dig up the links for the threads for the hunt, so people can browse through them and see what they can find.
Oh,
Yeah,
good luck. There's a lot of them.
Luther had some dissent to offer.
Yes.
So I want to hear what he has to say on the
Mhm.
matter.
Can any-
Oh, he's
Yeah.
kind of back.
Hear
Are
me?
you back, Luther?
There he is. There he is.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Hey!
Yes.
There you are.
Yay.
Huzzah!
Okay. No, is that right? I don't remember. I thought the observer became maimed.
Oh, was
Yeah.
that the observer had to be the one who was betrayed?
No,
Is it-
I thought that somehow the observer becomes maimed or crippled.
Yeah.
Like
if we're going-
when
Well, that was something I brought up when we were discussing. What was it? What was it last time? Was it Kings or Thieves?
It was Kings.
It was Kings. Yeah. Was I think I mentioned that, and the answer to that is not necessarily. It is a common theme, but observers don't always have to be harmed in some way.
Yeah. It depends. You could almost argue from the context of the Anu ad that Anu's grief is
The
is
maiming.
maiming
That's what I was
skill.
going to say.
Yeah.
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 Actually,
Uh,
Johnny Anonymous, the observer does need to observe the event. In fact, that's one of the points that Kirkbride brought up, which is that without an observer, the event does not happen.
So I'm going to mess everything up because that's what I do. I'm going to throw in an idea that we've talked. I think we've talked before, maybe not in this series, but in other places, that Anu Padme is one being, and that Padme is the shadow self of Anu. And so, really, the enantiomorphic conflict is between Anu and his darker self, and Nur, and the witness is the Godhead.
that puts a fourth. That gives us a fourth character, doesn't it?
No, if you
Depends on how
consider
many people you want to say Anu is.
Because
okay,
because on the Anu Padme conflict, or whichever, however that conflict occurs within the dream of the Godhead, then Test takes place within the dream of the Amaranth, which is Anu. Unless I
Okay,
am desperately
yeah.
misunderstood.
yeah, that's how
Are
I
you
understand it. Yeah.
distinguishing?
Yeah, but the order
you-
is different. The Padme kills Nier outside of the Tez Amaranth,
Yes.
and then Anu hides in the sun in his grief. So
Right.
So,
But the witness of this whole thing is the Godhead.
Which Godhead?
The Godhead. The uncaring Godhead
big
from
one?
the Black Books.
The big one. Okay.
That feels
Bethesda
that
Game
feels
Studios.
awfully, that feels awfully
Todd Howard.
Barkley.
Yeah, Todd Howard.
Of course, we had to go there sometime.
I had to.
Do we
Drink it
find
up,
at long
baby.
last? Do we find at long last that everything that happens in the Godhead is just a metaphor for buying Skyrim for the 16th time?
Oh, funny.
No, I hope not.
But okay, so no, I'm just gonna go off on a tangent that's not related to the
Please,
Observer
please.
at all. But
Please go ahead, Luther.
Oh, you think so? Okay.
We're related.
Well, okay,
somehow.
so the Godhead, it's split just like Anu is in his dream, because you always have to have that division. So the Godhead can't observe because the Godhead itself is the Enantiomorph. So in the you got the dream of the Elder Scrolls universe sitting right over here, and then you got the big Godhead that surrounds everything, all the dreams and everything, and that has to have its own stasis and chaos, and the third one, which is the Observer or whatever the hell it is. So like when I look at the Rebel King Observer, I think of stasis, change, and the other one.
Oh. Michael, I just got the thing about the Godhead being the observer.
Okay.
Oh,
It just landed. That's a really good theory.
Thank you.
That's a really good
Okay,
so
tell us
there's
your-
this
Phrases-
concept in
phrases.
Christian metaphysics. I don't know if it's specific to a particular, sect, to a particular Christian cult, but the idea that that all of reality exists in the mind of God and that God
George-
is experiencing himself subjectively.
Bishop.
Yeah.
Not subjectively. Are you thinking Berkeley? Bishop George Berkeley was the one that I associate with this, and he had the idea that there's nothing real but minds and ideas in minds, but there is an objective reality because reality is happening within the mind of God, and God is the guarantor of objective reality, because God is always watching. So to
There's
speak.
I don't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry.
No. That's pretty much the outline I had of it that kind of fits with that. But the only difference is that there isn't that element of subjectivity in there, and to quite that degree, because God sees everything, knows everything, is the originator of everything,
Right.
and that sort of thing. So it's not quite as fuzzy as having a Godhead with a fallible personality.
So I'm gonna throw something out here. Michael, tell me if this is accurate. I did this up a couple weeks ago. Let's see if it'll. Oh, no, I want the other screen.
Oh, sweet Jesus.
Uh-oh,
it's-
Captain, I think we're going to get you some overheads, projectors, and
where
slides.
we go. There it is. Okay,
Oh.
this was
Don't
it.
try- Okay.
Okay, so we've got this big blue circle full of the purple stuff.
Oh, my
Right.
sweet fuck.
Being the Godhead itself, the big one. And if we think of it in terms of, like string theory, the Godhead encompasses all of the 10th dimension. So all possible timelines, all possible variations of those timelines, et cetera,
Yeah.
et cetera. I'm getting thumbs up from RD there. And then, as I understand it, the purple stuff inside the Godhead is the dream sleeve. It's just a negative space that occupies between dreams, right? So each
But
white and green circle here being individual dreams within the Godhead. And I actually made
but
this
that purple stuff is filled with memories, so there's that.
Yeah.
Yeah, or the far shores, whichever way you want to spin it.
Yeah. I think I originally made this graphic to argue about Kalpic cycles and how just because a Kalpic cycle exists in one dream doesn't necessarily mean that there are Kalpic cycles in other dreams. But I mean,
that makes sense.
It serves as a good visual for kind of how the Godhead may be constructed and how we can think about it. So while we may have TES in the big one out here in the top right, we might have a Codeverse down here, or Fallout down here, or something. Because people like to combine those. So just
Right.
since it's very much a multiverse kind of system, then the Godhead certainly.
Yeah, this is my understanding. That's pretty much my understanding of the whole thing.
Mhm.
Okay. What was I gonna say now? I was gonna point something out, but now I forgot. What was I? Oh, okay. So I would say that the Godhead is the observer, but it's the ultimate observer. It's the observer of everything.
Yes.
Yes. So you still have those nested shells of observation that are occurring within a contained dream.
Yeah.
So and if the Godhead is the ultimate observer, which totally makes sense, you still have to have an observer in, like, for Nur or Anu, whichever one was the observer in the story where the annotated Anu would.
Yeah, but although we don't really know whether those those entities are the only entities within that universe, we don't hear either way.
Right.
There's part of me that's kind of imagining, is this a spat between lovers that happens in a town square, sort of thing. So you've got plenty going on, but we just don't hear about it because we're only interested in that particular bit of the soap opera.
Right.
And that way, it kind of reminds me of the Oh, I'm going to be a heretic for a second. In that way, it kind of reminds me of the Adam and Eve story, because Adam is not a proper name in Hebrew. It's Ha-Adam, which means mankind. And you could properly misinterpret that to mean that there were many people in the Edenic state.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
Adam, or Adam represented.
I can go with that.
the
Can I
whole
please
of
talk Christian
mankind.
theology with you after this? 'Cause
Michael's the guy you want to talk to.
otherwise, we're going to go really off topic. Anyway,
We have. I'm sorry. My fault.
Let's see. So Ferric asked an interesting question a little while ago.
Yep.
Is the assumption that Enantiomorph is an implicit structure in all Amaranth is always my understanding? Or wait a minute, can we apply the enantiomorphic structure if the Anu Padme near conflict took place outside of a reality defined by an enantiomorphic structure? I think that the fact that an enantiomorphic event happened that caused the creation of a reality that's basically an echo or a continuous echo of that event, it's sort of like saying, can you it's like starting to get into, like, you know, Plato's theory of forms. You know, is the first pure original event considered to be one of its own events? Is it included in the set of events, you know, mathematically speaking? And I think that it can. I think that you can say that the Anu Padme enantiomorph is the first enantiomorph because it defines the pattern from that step forward. Is it always three? Is it always those three roles? It's definitely those three roles, but it's not. But that doesn't mean it has to be three individual entities. As a matter of fact, it could theoretically be possible to have an enantiomorphic relationship with just two individuals, and then those two individuals perform the various roles required and the various tasks required themselves in any huge range of, you know, configurations. And if you want to try that as a thought experiment, just try developing plot lines for a movie or something that involves two characters that are in a conflict of some kind, and then just, you know, put them together and try to write a plot line that fills in the blanks, you know? And it's very easy to do it. Did the enantiomorph exist before Anu? That's a good question, Ferric, because what you're asking is, was the Godhead the result of or involved in an enantiomorph? And the answer might be that, you know, we don't know.
I think it was.
Can I interject here? Or Luther, you go ahead, and then I got something else.
I mean, I think it was first event of the Godhead. It's basically like describing the Godhead decided itself into the different concepts of reality, of doing all that. So I think it's just like, in the most basic form, that's what it is, but it gets more complex as you add more stuff to it, or possibly as the dreams continue on unto infinitum, you've got them kind of like changing the story slightly, adding bits and pieces here, removing bits and pieces here, you know, just like altering a little bit.
Yeah, which is kind of what Coda does, as far as I'm concerned. It's the idea of moving beyond that. Of kind of telling that story in such a way that the base story changes, because if the enantiomorphic structure carries on beyond into the Flower Child's Amaranth, then Vivek and Jubal's efforts really failed. But anyway, sorry, I totally cut Andrew off.
So here's my thought. If we assume that Anu is an Amaranth, which I think most of us can agree that Anu likely is, right? Then in the Godhead, he must have come from a dream to begin with, right? So making the TES universe a child dream of whatever dream Anu came from. Now, as to whether the enantiomorph existed in that dream or not, the one where I argue that Yokuda was a real place and it is the actual legit Yokuda, then I don't think it necessarily requires the enantiomorph to have an actual mythic presence in that dream. I think it had to be important enough to the dreamer, in this case Anu himself. It had to be such a momentous occasion to him that in his dreaming, his metaphors for the importance of this event are so salient that they become the structure of his dream because he cares so much about this event, right? And this is something that I've talked a lot about, the lens of perception when traveling between dreams. And whenever you're going from one dream to the next, you're going to pass through this, what I call the lens of perception, where if something were to go from Luther's mind into my mind, say direct transfer of data, it's going from how Luther understands it to how I understand it, and it changes in the discourse, right? So while Luther may see green, I see blue, just because that's the way quality of work, right? So so as we go from this dream that Anu comes from, an event happens, he interprets it in a certain way, and it becomes a core foundation for his dream. Does that make sense?
Yes.
What do you think?
Yes, I think that's absolutely how it works, because at the base level, a new godhead is describing a new reality based on their own experiences and so on, and so the most important parts of that experience become the most important parts of the reality, which is why it kind of echoes through.
Yeah. So I mean, and that's why when I bring up Yokuda, I talk about how so Yokuda, it was destroyed somehow. It was sank, and some say that maybe Cyrus did that when he used Pancrato's sword on Vivek, and then Tiber Septim fixed it or something. How so I think that the notion that Yokuda sank is just a metaphor Anu uses to describe how war-torn his home dream was. And that when that's translated into Anu's dream, it sank, because that's what happened, right? That's just Anu's metaphor that's being used. But because he came from that dream, his idea of Yokuda is closer to what Yokuda really is, right? Whereas like Akavir, for example, going the other way, this is a progeny dream from Anu's dream, right? So we've just got this infinite regress going on here. And so Anu can't make as much sense about Akavir as he can about Yokuda. So he uses more metaphor to describe it. And so when the Seisi or any Akaviri come over to Tamriel, they're crossing from one dream to the next. Anu has no choice but to use these metaphors to describe these people because he doesn't quite understand them. Well, if they eat language or whatever, then they literally do that now. And so that turns into we have the Seisi, the snake people, who may not, as far as Jubal is concerned, be actual snake people. They may be just regular people living in Akavir. The Nords and the Imperials of Akavir, that when they cross into the previous dream become something wildly different, simply because of that metaphor process.
Yeah, I like that theory a lot.
Okay. Should we try and thinking of trying to get this grounding into what the observer is in terms of in terms of Nern and how that works. There's the quote that kind of sticks with me is it's based on the Anu Padme Nern near Enantiomorph that MK posted up. The Nern, female land freedom catalyst for birth death of Enantiomorph Anu Padme, Enantiomorph with Rexwit betrayal, witnessing shield-thane that goes blind or is maimed, and thus solidifies the waveform. Blind maimed equals final decision. The bit that kind of intrigues me there, and I think we need to get to the waveform stuff, but the bit that kind of intrigues me there is what the shield-thane is, because we have the examples of Trinomac and Alandru Sul, where you're talking actual shield-thanes being part of an Enantiomorph, and but you've also got the requisite betrayal, or maybe you haven't. I don't. I don't honestly know there, because you have either the shield force that supports their lord, and nothing really changes. And in that case, do you really have an Enantiomorph, or do they then betray and then change happens? I don't know whether the shield-thane aspect of the observer actually means within the context of the Enantiomorphs that get talked about in Tamriel's mythology. Does anyone have anything they can add to that?
I was going to bring up the shield-thane that goes blind when he witnesses Hroll loving unto a hillock.
Yep.
Right. It's the classic example.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Who's the rebel and king in that context? I have no idea.
The Hillock, obviously.
But
Well, the hillock itself is Nirn. The so hard to say.
And you will.
It's
you
definitely
also
two
have,
opposites. It's a mortal man and the infinite Earth.
the immortal Earth, yeah.
Who's the king and who's the rebel?
spirit.
I don't know. Probably the Earth is the king and the man is the rebel because of the exercise of will.
I like
Yeah.
that. I like that.
It's Hroll is the active principle there, unless you want to say that the spirit of Elysia took the initiative somehow. I'm not really sure quite.
Yeah, that hill was
quite
asking
what-
for it. It was dressing slutty.
Oh no! Can we please?
And that's how we got this.
but,
Look at them flowers.
Okay.
That's
Damn sexy flowers.
What are some other examples of a witness that we can draw upon here? You
Well,
got
we
Zernark.
can look at. Oh yeah. I mean, you can do a lot with the whole Talos oversoul. Or
Talos. There, any of the one elements is one is one of the others.
yeah, that's what makes Talos really interesting. Is there are three Enantiomorphs occurring at once, and they all intersect with each other.
A little bit, yeah.
Potentially, not with the heresy as written, annoyingly enough.
Yeah.
But
I mean, there's also the
with
red
Skeleton
moment.
Man's interview, yes.
There's also the red moment.
Yeah.
Almsavy, and then you got Nerevar and Kagranak and Alendro Sewell, and all these.
Which Sewell in this case.
Yeah, you've got these 6 different characters who all connect in different ways. There's so much going on in both Talos and the red moment. So I don't know if there's somewhere in particular we want to start with that.
There's a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I find the to be particularly interesting, given that he was blasted into his own armor, but that's, I don't know, a whole different thing, I think.
The bit that kind of chimes with me on that is the notion of knowledge, and if we can go with if we stick being blinded or maimed and knowledge together, and the thing that I immediately leap to is the Hanged Man, and Odin sticking himself on a tree, gouging out his eye, and all that sort of thing in order to gain knowledge to write of all things, or for knowledge of the runes. But it's the idea of it's the idea of the witness. The witness possibly, at least with those examples, kind of learns something, and then suffers for it.
Or sacrifices to learn something. Yeah. Like in the case of Odin, he willingly sacrificed to gain knowledge. I don't know if that's the case for any of the other witnesses, whether or not they ever willingly sacrifice themselves or their pieces of themselves.
Here's a question.
In
Morrowind's main plot, we are in the Nerevarine is in an enantiomorphic chiral opposite to Dagoth-Ur.
Yep.
So who's the witness?
Vivek.
What knowledge does Vivek gain?
Ooh. Oh, that's
Not
I can argue knowledge of mortality because he becomes mortal again, but that's possibly stretching the point.
I don't know.
well, that's the maiming part. I think the maiming part is he loses his
Yeah.
immortality.
Well,
Yeah.
could it have something to do with? I mean, I might be bringing in Coda a little too much here, but at the end of Coda, Vivek has a very strong position. In relationship to Jubal, who is an Evergreen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'm sure Dagoth Third fits in there somewhere, but Numidium does as well. In fact, in Coda, I would say I would say that Vivek is the observer there, whereas Jubal is the thief and Numidium is the king, because Jubal is tasked by Vivek to go and kill Numidium, who then does it after he cuts both his hands off, and he's got the moons and stars in his eyes and stuff, and
Which is weird because he's maiming himself.
yeah.
But it's for love, I guess, not for knowledge. Or is that the same thing? I don't even know.
Look, well, there's
Now
the
to think
there's the
about it.
whole there's the whole thing that he doesn't need his hands anymore because he has Chim. He's achieved royalty.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna
when?
let me
How? When?
prior to Coda.
Oh, I see.
How else does he send a love letter through time? I mean, that's some serious shenanigans. So let me back up a little bit and suggest, let me complicate things as I always do. There are so many enantiomorphic relationships in Morrowind that it's kind of a nightmare. And I would argue that it's founded upon an enantiomorphic relationship of Azura as ruling queen, the tribunal as rebel, and Dagoth as witness. And
I like
his
that.
maiming is, well, just look at the guy.
His maiming is the Sharmat got a hold of him. That's what his maiming is.
Yeah, he embodies the Sharmat. No, I don't know. That's just something that came out to me. I may be completely off.
Well, who decides between the tribunal and Azura in that case?
What do you mean? Who decides?
Oh, sorry. You were saying that Azura is king, tribunal is rebel. Who decides which is which in that point? Because they are the observer in that case.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Well, who decides it? Okay.
Well, they steal divinity. So
yeah.
that's
okay.
Or rather, yeah.
Okay, so
they steal.
They
steal the three gods.
Now
we're down to.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say we're down to the enantiomorph of 2 elements here rather than 3 in that case, because it's the tribunal doing it to themselves and for themselves, without the need for the third element, which I know you have a beef with, Michael, from one of your last videos. But
I'm too alchemically oriented, I guess.
Yeah.
But
so
then
here's something.
Although if we want to go alchemical, the third element is produced by the 2. It's the interaction of Sol and Luna that makes Mercurius in most of the texts I've come across. Which, again, I don't want to revisit Anu Padme too much, but their interplay produces Nier, which is kind of keys in there. But I don't know quite where that's going. Sorry, that was just a thought I was throwing out there.
But because you have this rebel king relationship between Azura and the tribunal, then everything that comes after that continues to mirror that. The Nerevarine and Dagoth the Nerevarine and Amalexia. Would that make Sothasil the observer? I don't know. This is probably getting too weird.
Dead.
Could be.
He is the mage.
He is the mage.
He is the mage.
Yeah.
I like this question. Did Boethia and or Mathala object to being represented in the tribunal? I think for Mathala, absolutely. That's why we have fire and darkness. with the Dark Brotherhood Morag Tong split. Because the Dark Brotherhood
Yeah.
recognized that the Morag Tong lost their way with Mephala and are now working with Vivek instead, who has usurped Mephala's place, right? And so the Dark Brotherhood are going back to the roots, as it were. Whereas common consensus used to be, oh, yeah, they worship Sithis and they don't know what they're talking about and blah, 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 the Morag Tong are OG. And whereas Fire and Darkness shows that it's just not the point, or that's not the fact. So I don't think Mephala likes Vivek at all, even though she has been mantled by Vivek and just so, walking just so as to maintain her own identity. But I mean, I don't know. I can't speak too much for people.
The tribunal basically did a PR campaign and didn't really care for the people that they were agents for. And I also don't see that Azura would have been that happy either, despite the anticipation saying, "Oh, these three submitted willingly to the authority of the tribunal." That's rubbish as far as I'm concerned. So, it was just so I don't see that Mephala or anyone else needs to have submitted willingly either. And we kind of started talking about Boethia, but the other one of the other ones, which I know Michael wants to talk about at some point, and one of the other ones that kind of interested me was Trinomac, Malakath, and all the multiple Enantiomorphs again that happened with Convention. How much do we want to go into observers at Convention? Do we want to talk about Magnus and Trinomac in those sorts of terms?
Well, I think Magnus is pretty obviously the observer for Convention. Yeah. The question is whether or not Lorkhan is the thief or the king.
Well, I think, considering, do we agree that Convention happens atop Adamantia, which puts them firmly in Nirn?
Could do, sure.
Yeah.
Because if they are in Nirn, if they are in Mundus, then that would make Lorkhan the ruling king, because it's
king.
Yeah. We're in his dojo, so that would make him the ruling king. So then when his heart is ripped out, that is the thief, doing his thing.
Yeah, but when he's didn't create Mundus, he's not the ruling king, he's the thief.
Yeah.
But the thief always seems to be the one who steals Chim, isn't that the...
Well, it's not necessarily Chim, it's just something of value. The thief just has to steal something of value.
Observation. The thief always steals Chim. Like when Vivek stole Chim from Molag Bal. He I don't know who the observer was.
Good one, Nekken.
The what?
Nekken pointed out that Khan in Lorkhan does mean king.
King, yep.
Oh.
Yep. But yeah, if we're sorry, you were talking about Lorkhan as sorry, I've lost my thread. But if we go to
the observer.
Oh yeah.
Who was the observer when Lorkhan's heart was ripped out?
Well, it was Magnus, because that was Convention.
Pretty sure it was Magnus.
No, he was
Trinomac was the one who did the actual tearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was making the choice between who would win between Akatosh and Lorkhan. He was the one collapsing the waveform. That's the way I've always taken that. And also that's my understanding that Convention and creation are two separate things. You had the creation of Mundus and all that setup, in which Magnus is the observer. Kind of set everything up, decided how it was going to be, and then cleared up, and then cleared out, and then you have convention at Adamantia, which is deciding what's going to be done with Lorkhan. And is Lorkhan going to win the trial or lose? Sorry, Luther.
and also making time linear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that also kind of explains. But having Trinimac as the observer for the Lorkhan Akatosh Enantiomorph as opposed to the Lorkhan Oriel Enantiomorph, that also to me explains why Trinimac suffered at the hands of Boethia in quite that way. He was maimed at a later point, but I don't know whether that's just because the universe decided.
Okay.
I don't know whether that's because the universe decided you've done an Enantiomorph and you've observed it, therefore you must be bitch slapped by reality at some point for what you've done.
There's a disconnect. There's a disconnect that I'm seeing.
Okay.
In one version of the story, it was Ariel that ripped out Lorkhan's heart, but then in another, it was Trinimac. So, I mean, which version do we look at, right? Because I've heard it both ways. Because Ariel's bow was what was used to fling out, fling Lorkhan's heart and end up in Red Mountain, and then Trinimac being the one who actually opened his heart to begin with. So, do we in fact have 4 entities there? Because the idea was that Magnus was there as well. I don't know. I mean, I think convention and creation, they are 2 different events, but I think they happen in the same untime, in the same sort of moment, when moments are irrelevant. If that makes sense, because it's a really complicated, convoluted kind of.
Yeah, I can see that, but we have different accounts of convention almost. That if you want to link creation and convention, that's the way most people are presenting it. But you also have some accounts that talk about convention only happening either after or contemporaneous with the Elnathay Wars.
Because here's the thing: like time, in a linear sense, wasn't established until Red Mountain had sprung up. We have 2 towers now, Adamantia and Red Mountain. The dragon is now forced to fly between the 2, which makes Lorkhan's heart Akatosh's cage. That's why we see, the cage of Akatosh and Lorkhan's heart in Coda. So before that point, there was no linear time. It was, a great big wobbly ball of, stuff. So I mean, how do we approach creation and convention, considering that there is no before and after? One event does not precede the other, and vice versa. It's all
simultaneously.
Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of been my idea of it. So creation and convention all happen from a linear standpoint all at the same moment, because that's what untime is. It's one moment frozen forever in infinite, finiteness. I mean, it's hard for us to discuss that with human minds.
It's almost a causal.
I don't think it's possible for us to understand non-linear time.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, that would be a difficult one.
Yeah. Okay. In that case, yeah, that one's just wound up in a much bigger question mark than I thought.
We're getting a bit off topic anyway.
Yeah. I just also wanted to say, again, thinking about the Elnathay Wars, and kind of thinking about the nature of observers, can non-beings witness things in the enantiomorphic sense, because there was a bit in the Numantia Intercept that kind of fascinated me. Was that time began to last in stepped fashion. Those spirits that remained lesser and greater, involuntary or eventual earthbone, surrendered all definite hold on divinity. Old Meris bore witness and built the remaining towers during the Merithic. And then there's the huge, great list of different towers. If you think about, and then you think about Old Meris getting ruined or disappearing altogether, depending on quite which mythology you believe. Did Old Meris bear witness to the Elnathay Wars? Do we want to think of the Histers, the Bystanders, bearing witness there, or is there anything meaningful that can be gained from either of those comparisons?
Well, you know my idea that the Elnathay Wars, in its later echoes, is really the man-mer schism, and it's the beast folk,
Right.
or the non-elves and non-men who witness.
Yeah, that's. I thought that was a pretty cut and dry assumption. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's,
Okay, fair enough.
there's I don't know where I read it, but I just read it earlier that it literally says that the Hist were bystanders in the war.
Yes. Yeah, that's in the Anuad, I think.
Yes.
Yes. But yeah, it was just that passage in the Numantia Intercept that kind of made my ears prick up, and think, well, was Aldmeris witness to something?
Remember in modern physics also that you can collapse the waveform. You don't have to have like a human observer to collapse a waveform.
Okay.
You can have any kind of observer collapse the waveform. It can be object. It doesn't matter.
It could be the measuring device itself. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
As far as what do non-gods gain by witnessing something, it's just, I mean, Johnny, they gain something. They can gain something. They don't have to. But it could be, it could be that a witness to two homeless people fighting it out discovers that one of them had, rye in his pocket. I mean, it doesn't. It could be anything. Just that they observe and then gain in knowledge in some way or power or something. That they get something out of it. Law of physics is a witness and change afterwards. Maybe, Captain. Maybe. Considering that so many things are anthropomorphized in the Elder Scrolls universe, even the laws of physics have a mind of their own. So
the laws of physics are the Earthbones. So.
Yeah. And you actually interact with them directly in ESO.
Yeah.
Where?
Yeah.
When?
The Daggerfall Covenant.
Is it the Daggerfall Covenant? I thought it was somewhere in Balamwood.
Yeah.
Both. Yeah.
You chat with Ifri.
Yeah.
Or Ifri.
Yeah, I'm thinking of, I can't remember the name of the quest, but there's 3 or 4 Earthbones, fire, water, earth, and air, who are bound by somebody. Might be the Gravecaller.
Everything changed in the Third Nation thing.
And you free them, and then you can have brief conversations with them. But yeah, there are conversations with Earthbones and Valenwood as well. It's all through ESO.
Yep.
And people say ESO ruined lore.
I know, right? You go to the moons. Okay, I'll stop.
You go to the fucking moon.
Every game ruins lore for someone. There's always toys going to be thrown out of prams somewhere.
That's a completely fair statement.
I'm just looking forward to the next Elder Scrolls game getting announced, and then everybody can complain about it. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Oh yeah.
I'm looking forward to bitching and moaning about the new Elder Scrolls game.
And then
ruined the lore.
It'll switch from Oblivion was the best Elder Scrolls game to Skyrim was the best Elder Scrolls game ever. Test 6 is horrible. I can't wait for it.
Oh my god.
In the meantime, all this Morrowind people are in the background going, eh.
And then and behind them are the Daggerfall people going,
Yeah.
more wins for casuals.
Yeah. Call me when the game's randomly generated again.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Was there?
Hi, Doc.
Okay. I'm just trying to think whether there was any more specific bits I wanted to bring up in relation to this. I'm thinking that the key ones for me in terms of understanding the witness have always been kind of the original Roman and the various ones at convention. But I also think that does Trinomac do again? I can't not think Trinomac is a witness somewhere because of the transformation there. And getting spurned and so on, which kind of links into some stuff that Michael wanted mentioned earlier about the witness as scapegoat, which I don't know, Michael. Did you want? I can't entirely remember where you were going to go with that, but did you want to kind of talk through your ideas on that?
I certainly can. So, one of my crazy ideas is that the entirety of TESS is based upon the concept of mimetic theory or mimetic violence. And this is a theory created by the French polymath René Girard. And he found it as a pattern in mythology, but also in literature, and of course in real life as well. The basic idea is that we do not know by ourselves what we want. We determine what we want or desire by imitating other people. So, classic example, little kid hanging out in the room. He isn't playing with a certain toy, and then another kid comes in and wants to play with that toy, and suddenly the first kid's like, "Oh no, I have to play with that," and they end up in conflict over it. Another one that's sometimes talked about is relational. That you may have somebody who isn't. I want to be careful with this one. That you can have someone we'll say a male and female, and maybe the female isn't interested in the male until someone else is interested in him, and then he becomes desirable. It's the imitation of someone else's desire. So the person who first desires something is called the model, and the person who imitates it is called, obviously, the imitator. And they end up in a rivalry for whatever this thing is that they're trying to get, and they become what Girard calls doubles, because they mirror each other's conflict and aggression, equal and opposite aggressions. So this can't go on, because otherwise everything just gets destroyed. And so what's decided is that it's all the fault of something else, and that's the scapegoat. Yeah, right, exactly. And so the way that I apply this to TESS is that the king is the model, or these two are interchangeable. The king could be the model, the rebel could be the imitator, or vice versa. But the observer is the scapegoat. And I think that we have a great example of this in the Arcturian heresy, and I'm gonna read a section. This is after there's been this is the big fight. The Underking, that being Wolfhearth, arrives and is ambushed by Imperial guards. As he takes them on, Zurin Arctus uses a soul gem on him. With his last breath, the Underking's heart roars a hole through the battle mage's chest. In the end, everyone is dead, and the Underking is reverted back to ash, and Tiber Septim strolls in to take the soul gem. When the Elder Council arrives, he tells them about the second attempt on his life, this time by his trusted battle mage, Zurin Arctus, who is attempting a coup. Now, there's a whole lot going on in that passage, but the basic idea is that there had always been this kind of conflict between Wolfhearth and Tiber, wherein Zurin had kind of been the observer, and in this instance, then, Tiber blames it on Zurin. He literally scapegoats him and says, "Oh no, this was all his fault."
I like that.
Yeah.
And there's several other places, and so in typical mimetic theory, then eventually, by scapegoating somebody, then the model and the imitator are restored in relationship, and the conflict is ended, and eventually the scapegoat is sacralized, and that all this person's horrible whatever provided the way for us to be redeemed to one another, and you can see that Zurin Arctis as Underking is held in fairly high esteem in imperial culture.
That works. Do we have any other examples of definite scapegoating? I'm just thinking that in general, it kind of makes sense for whoever winds up on top in the Enantiomorph to start off the person who made them so, because they can think, this guy is obviously powerful enough to decide my fate. He's not going to do it again.
Right.
Just in case he decides another way.
I obviously apply this to Anu and Padme, who are in conflict. Yeah. And this version I'm saying is the two of them in conflict. Nur witnesses it. And then the funny thing about this story is that everybody thinks that the brothers are fighting because they want Nur. And she actually isn't the cause. Because in the Inuit, it says that they came into the void. They came into the void for a reason. We don't know what. Typically, when somebody's scapegoated, they become the reason, and people forget the original reason. Possibly they came to order the chaos. Who knows? But they come in. They have their reason for conflict, which seems to have been there from the beginning. Nur observes it. She gets scapegoated, originally by Padme, which would work as the shadow self. And she dies, and they don't really get reconciled exactly, and it doesn't always work out like this. But I think that's generally a pretty good example.
Well, in Anu's dream, Anu and Padme do get pulled out beyond time together. Is that reconciliation of a sort?
It could be, because they end up in quote unquote the same place. So let's see. We could do this a couple other ways. Let's take a look at. Let's see. The Civil War is always a good one. I know the Civil War. Nobody wants to talk about it, but Ulfric and Tullius, we can argue about who's the ruling king. This one's particularly interesting because it's the last Dragonborn who's the witness, and if you go the route of, it's the Stormcloak, the Imperial one yet, but you're offered the opportunity to kill Tullius herself, making you the rebel who becomes king. So that then it's your fault.
Or are you the scapegoat?
To add
to that, there's some discussion going on in chat here about the relationship between Hermaeus Mora, Mirak, and the Last Dragonborn. And it looks like it was Johnny Anonymous said, because in the end it's Hermaeus Mora that kills Mirak. You defeat him, but Mirak kills him. But Hermaeus Mora kills Mirak.
Yeah.
Right? So, as Johnny said, you would think Magnus would be. Oh no, sorry, that was. I'm getting. Oh no, it was. No, it was Neck and Elb. Sorry, I see it as more trying to disable the Enantiomorph to stop the LDB from growing too powerful, which could be interesting. If we like the idea of the Last Dragonborn being a witness and then being shunted into the position of the thief who becomes king, then that whole transposition of location within the Enantiomorph could continue in Dragonborn, where you're about to kill Mirak, and then Hermaeus Mora jumps in to be the thief to kill Mirak, or something. I mean, it kind of goes back to what we had talked about last Lorecast. But we kind of talked about how each prince is the ruling king in their own domain, and so how does that work? Is is Mirak the ruling king in Apocrypha for that moment, and is then usurped by Hermaeus Mora in his own realm? I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think the ruling king applies if whatever's being fought over is under the domain of the ruling king. But I don't think that was the case in Hermaeus Mora's case. It was happening, the conflict was happening in Apocrypha, but it wasn't about or concerning Apocrypha.
Sure.
So I don't think it matters that Hermaeus Mora was the ruling king of his domain.
Okay, I see.
Although, counter to that, you've both, it's basically Mora deciding who his champion is. So Mora is just reshuffling his pawns in a sense.
Yeah.
Well, sort of, but then again, the reason why the Dragonborn is there in the first place is because Mirak has been messing with Solstheim. So, in this particular case, I think maybe the thief determines what the object of value is, really.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I would say that the Dragonborn is definitely the witness in that case, though. In fact, I would say that the prisoner most often is the witness.
Yeah,
in
maybe.
stories.
Yeah, and then
no, because
you can. Sorry.
Specifically, in one of Michael Kirkbride's little rants that he has had on Mimospore, he has specifically said that you make the moment and you collapse the waveform for that moment. So as the prisoner or as the player, you are the one who collapses the waveform and creates the moment to occur.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, you are always
the observer.
Always the player is the witness. Yep.
And I think a great example of that, spoilers, if you haven't played it, it's years ago, come on, is the end of Oblivion.
Yeah.
Where you hack the way
Yeah.
into the Temple of the One at the end of the main quest, and you witness the fight between Mehrunes Dagon and the Avatar of Akatosh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and that's something that we talked about. I think in the Thief Lorecast was we kind of identified how the role in the Enantiomorph is kind of cycled through each game. But if we're agreeing that we're basically always the observer, I mean, how is the Nerevarine the observer? Really, because
I mean, he might not be the observer in the main quest. He's the rebel in the main quest, but he is creating. God, I don't know how to describe it. Let me look up the quote again, because it was quite a beautiful quote. But that's a good question. I mean, how is the Dragonborn the observer when he kills Alduin? We don't know.
Yeah. Is the prisoner always the hero? To himself?
Yeah.
Is he always the hero?
We talked about prisoners.
I'm having a hard time thinking of an example where the prisoner isn't the hero. So, but I can't imagine that it wouldn't be possible to write a plot line or a storyline where he's not the hero. Where the king is the hero and the main character, and then the king defeats the prisoner by successfully defending the MacGuffin. Yeah, capital H hero as in Campbell's hero, as in everything he does is intrinsically noble.
The hero's story.
Yeah. It's
fitted to their own nature.
I want to say that it might be possible for the hero to be the king. I'm pretty sure you could work it out. I'm pretty sure you could figure it out.
There's possibly an argument to be made in Skyrim because everyone says, "Oh, you're the Dragonborn, aren't you? Wonderful!" Immediately.
I potentially have an example of the prisoner not being the hero.
Mm-hmm.
The Last Jedi. Luke is the prisoner.
Oh, I'm gonna have to think about that one.
Yeah. Ray's the hero, maybe? I'm not really sure. Maybe? Kind of?
Well, she's
That was
the
true.
one she's the one who enters her own mother, so to speak.
I always took it that the prisoner has the freedom to be the hero and can make that choice uninhibited.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I
So
suppose the prisoner is all three.
yeah, I mean because
Yeah.
because the prisoner is given a choice, it is not necessarily the fact that the prisoner becomes the hero, but all heroes are prisoners, not all prisoners are heroes.
Hmm.
Does that jive?
Yeah, because Luke kind of does become a hero, sort of.
You know,
Kind of.
Well, he's been there, done that in episode 6, but
Yeah, he's the hero with 1,000 faces. He's the
Truth.
self-insert character. But yeah, I mean, like just like the self-insert prisoner is you, or is the prisoner, I should say. So you're always, oh god, I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
But yeah, in tests, we do tend to play the prisoner. That's almost always the case.
Yeah,
I would say it
Ooh.
is always the case.
Good one. I love nachos.
yeah.
It's an interesting point. The prisoner
Yeah.
embraces the gray maybe and gets to choose. Well, then again, the theoretically you could say the observer gets to choose too. The observer gets to choose who's the prisoner and who's the hero, who's the king.
Yeah, so I guess that creates a link between the observer and the player character. The player character always being
Maybe. I think we might be
Observer.
shooting ourselves in the foot here. I think we might be trying to assign more structure than is necessarily needed.
Yeah.
sure.
Mm.
yeah,
Um,
it's all chaos.
yeah, one of the reasons why the enantiomorphic relationship works as a plot line, as a plot device, is because it's vague, and it enables a great deal of flexibility. The more you try to nail down specifics and rules and stuff, the more you start to rule out other things, and it's probably not very constructive, I think.
Yeah, particularly when you get multiple ones involved. But there's part of me that wants to kind of get multiple enantiomorphs as a necessary thing for the walking way, for certain of the walking ways. But
Yeah,
that's another tangent altogether.
More than 4 people involved in a story, or
I'm
more than
liking-
3. I mean,
I'm liking this idea that Ferric is suggesting in chat. I feel like there should be some time taken out at some point, either on this cast or future one, to run down some terms, since I feel like there's a lot of moving around and mixing and matching. Like a vocabulary primer.
yeah, that might be a good idea to do a vocabulary.
episode.
Yeah, we there has been one way back when, but another one is probably overdue.
Yeah, that was so long ago.
I think we did have a glossary episode. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Was there? Okay.
Yeah. In that case, was there anything else we wanted to talk over? We're coming up on about a minute and 5 or 10 or so.
Yeah, I think we've rambled across this pretty good.
Yeah.
I think we proved that the observer is actually a pretty complicated subject.
Yeah.
Yeah. We didn't even get anywhere near quantum physics yet.
Oh Lord.
I mentioned
actually could've.
string theory.
Yeah. No, we brought up quantum physics.
I mentioned some quantum physics.
Yeah. Yeah. But now the one closing observation on that, if I may, I'm just looking into the observation effect in quantum physics. Specifically, is the notion that the act of observation defines the superpositions of the entities. It does not define the entities themselves.
Yeah.
Which feels very, very interesting in terms of roles. It says nothing about what any particular either of those entities actually are.
Well,
but gives them a place.
It's because a superposition is a mathematical function that encompasses a range of probabilities. The superposition is not a set of coordinates. It's just it's like a range. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of, you know.
Yeah, it's a cloud.
Although also for not to mess with your heads too much, but the quantum uncertainty principle, the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, has been disproven.
Yep.
They've actually
Really?
determined how to observe subatomic particles directly.
Whoa.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
Why wasn't that a big thing?
why wasn't it? It was a big thing. You just missed out on it.
I guess I did.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, but yeah, they figured out how to observe subatomic particles directly. So it's not. It's still, you know,
Right.
and I mean, and I don't know if they're still expressing them in terms of superpositions now. I think they've gotten specific enough so they can. I think either that or they've reduced superpositions down to such a low variation that they just call it. Yeah, okay, it's here. You know.
Yeah. Fair enough.
They just
Yeah.
describe them appropriately now. But the idea of an unobservable particle is so philosophically wonderful that it's hard to let go of.
Yeah, Higgs boson and all that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, did we come up with an idea what we're doing? I think we're doing the Thalmor next.
Yes.
There is
yes,
some
we
debate
are.
going on in the Selectives Lorecast group about whether or not we're going to do it as a part 1 of X. Because we could theoretically talk quite a bit about the Thalmor. I know I could go on and on and on about him. I love the Thalmor. But if we, what I think we're probably, I'm going to suggest maybe we just play it by ear and we do the Thalmor and we do a second episode if we feel we can and a third episode if we feel we have to. But we just try to tackle the Thalmor. But then from there, we start talking about other political entities in the Elder Scrolls universe.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, like the Aldmeri Dominion, the difference between the Thalmor and the Aldmeri Dominion.
Yes.
You know, I don't know anything about, but I think it could be worth discussing the Thane and system in Skyrim of sort of like a warlord kind of system. It could be
I can go on
worth
the history of that.
discussing the difference between Cyrodiil under an emperor and under the council.
Yeah.
We could discuss Breton government if we want to have if we want to have a cast that puts me to sleep.
Hey, now King Arthur is
Why?
cool.
There's that
Yeah,
done
King
very
Arthur's
great
cool. I don't
houses.
understand how that's relevant to Bretons.
Yeah.
Oh, I will tell you, brother.
Yeah.
Oh,
I will lecture
okay.
you.
Okay, I'll let you.
Right.
I'll let you.
Breton lore is Arthurian lore. I'll just leave it at that.
I'm completely fine with that because it only goes to prove my point that Bretons are boring as hell because they're not original enough and they're based on whatever. Okay.
Just got channel our inner John Milton.
Yeah. Hey. All right.
Okay.
So, thanks everybody for watching. We'll be back. When are we going to do this again? 2 weeks from now?
2 weeks.
Sounds good.
I'll stick
that's-
something.
So not
That's-
next
that's
weekend, but
been
the weekend after.
established, yeah.
Hang on, I'm just trying to think. 2 weeks. That's the week after Easter, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That'd be the 31st.
Oh no, that's between Good Friday and Easter Sunday. I'm not sure that's people are probably going to be places.
We might have to push it to the week after.
3
that, then.
weeks then.
Okay, so week after.
Say the
Okay.
7th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Cool.
great.
Which whatevs.
All right, so we'll
Okay.
see everybody on the 7th of whenever April. Yes, fantastic. I like it. Gonna be
Cool.
around 2 to 3, and I will be more specific then. But everybody, wave goodbye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thanks for
Take care,
watching.
friends.
I'm waving.
Bye.
Bye. Have fun storming the castle.
Have fun
No.
storming the castle. You think it'll work?
Take a
That's
miracle.
awesome.
Goodbye.
Bye.